Hey, how's it going? Over the past week, I have been trying to think of when the last time a video game made me cry. Because, in my life in general, I don't really find myself being brought to tears, whether it's a movie or a show, or even just events happening in my life, I very rarely cry. One thing I've found is that I react to a lot of the things I consume way after the fact. When I watch a movie or a show, usually a day after I've had time to really think about it is when I feel strongly about it. And that goes for games as well for the most part. I remember I just finished BioShock, and after I finished it, I thought, wow, that was a great game, but it wasn't until the next day where I kind of got that craving to play it again, and I started thinking about the story, and I wanted to find all the little audio recordings and really engross myself more in the story. It just sort of took that marinating period to feel strongly about it. And that sort of made me think of when I watch shows with my girlfriend. Almost every time at the end, she will be in tears. And while I'm not sitting there stone-faced and, I do still feel emotion, I'm not a robot, I'm never really ever brought to tears. I don't think I ever have been in recent memory. I remember in middle school, I would cry at shitty romance animes and even like Sword Art Online and stuff like that. But I think that was more so just me being an unstable teenager rather than maybe some sort of strong connection I had with that show. Or maybe it's a little bit of both. But nowadays, I just never really do. I just haven't really felt super strongly about something like that. But I started to sort of think about, okay, well, I haven't been brought to tears out of sadness or anything like that, but there have been times that I've cried about a game. One of the times I've actually talked about before on this channel, and that was when I was playing Minecraft. This was, I think, more so due to just where I was in that point in my life where I was sort of alone, just playing Minecraft. I had a bunch of other stuff going on. I was just trying to relax, and I was mining in the Nether. I, could have been for quartz, or I don't even know if Netherite was in the game during that time. Usually when I'm playing any game, but especially Minecraft, I'll be watching YouTube, listening to my other music, something like that. But this time, no, it was just me and the game. I was sort of zoning out a little bit, and the sort of very bassy, overpowering music that accompanies you in the Nether faded in. And for some reason in this moment, I just got flooded with memories over the years of playing with friends. And in that moment, I was alone. And it was, for some reason, really moving to me. I was flooded with all of these memories that I hadn't really processed, and, sort of unexpectedly, just all at once, this overcoming emotion, I teared up a little bit. I wasn't sobbing, but it was a moment that really stuck with me, so much so that, now I've mentioned it twice on this channel. But there was also another time that I've never talked about. That was with Sonic Mania. And now this wasn't a sad story. It's kind of the opposite. I'm sure there's not a lot watching this channel, but if you have been a Sonic fan your whole life or even during the 2010s, it was definitely a rough period of just not a lot of great things happening. And Sonic Mania got revealed, and that was sort of like this light at the end of the tunnel. For me at least, the only mainline Sonic game that I enjoyed through that whole era was Generations. I had essentially gone decades, or at least a decade, without a real Sonic game that I enjoyed. And I remember seeing the announcement trailer for Sonic Mania and being really excited and everything, but I know Sega, so tempering myself and waiting to play the game. I remember waiting up for release, talking to people about it, getting my collector's edition, having the statue that I, talked about a couple videos ago, and playing it, and it really was this amazing game and everything that I hoped it was going to be. And, to this day, I've beaten it probably over 100 times. I remember going back probably about 2 or 3 years after the game came out and watching that initial reveal trailer, and I started crying a little bit, happy tears of like, wow, this was truly a special moment in time. I think it's so rare that a game comes out and it really is everything you want it to be. Even now, I can, play any game and find something I don't like about it. But Sonic Mania is one of those few games where, people that I went to school with or that actually know me kind of make fun of me for it. But it is truly, with Minecraft, the game I just talked about, it definitely flip-flops. But I would say that is probably my favorite game of all time, just because of, I think, the spot I was in life when it came out and how great it truly was. As stupid as it sounds, a $20, almost indie game of Sonic the Hedgehog moved me so much that I was crying at an announcement trailer 2 years after the fact. It's almost a little embarrassing to admit, but I think I've talked about much worse on this channel before. But those two things, they're not really like sad. I was initially trying to think of like, has a game ever really moved me like that? And I can't think of anything. And I started to really think about a manga that I read, which I know is weird. It's not a video game, but I don't think a piece of fiction or media, whatever you want to call it, has moved me like Goodnight Punpun has. And this is a manga that I think if you look it up, you'll see so many people saying, it's such a great manga, but don't read it. And I would definitely sort of agree with that. There's a lot of really just uncomfortable moments in it. A lot of, I think maybe for a lot of people, triggering scenes and stuff like that. And I remember reading it, and, the whole time I was just like, oh my god, you're really struggling with this character. And then I got to chapter 146 or 147, something like that. And it's going to be light spoilers, but I don't think it's going to be anything that crazy. You follow Punpun throughout this whole book, and you see him and all these other characters struggling and going through these uncomfortable moments in life, to where you as the reader are almost vulnerable, just as much as the characters are. And Punpun is sort of portrayed in the book as this bird character, so that you're able to be more relatable to him, and you're able to impose yourself more onto him. And while there are certainly so many things that I don't relate to Punpun about, because he's kind of not the best person, this one chapter is basically him after the fact, after all this horrible stuff happens, and he's talking to Aiko, his love interest, throughout the whole book. And I am going off the top of my head, but there are quotes like, of him saying, I know you can't kill me anymore. I'm forgetting what you look like, what you sound like. I have to keep moving forward. And it sort of is just this, after suffering through all of this stuff with Punpun as the reader, and then having this chapter that is strictly dedicated to a dream that Punpun is having, where he sort of is confronting Aiko. And while I don't have, someone like Aiko in my life that I can relate this to, I do sort of have a period in my life that I can relate this to. My past, thinking about all these things that are still bothering me, that I will myself dream about. And like I've mentioned about the other two things, again, it was the period of my life that I read this in. This was truly a pretty dark time in my life a couple years ago when I first read this manga. And reading this chapter, I was able to relate it to my past and relate to certain things that I wasn't letting go of and that were really bothering me to this day. But, when I was thinking about them, I wasn't able to remember, certain people, certain events. All these things were sort of fading out of my mind, just like Aiko was for Punpun. And when I put it in that perspective, I do remember crying while reading the end of this book. And I definitely recommend people who can handle it to read this manga. It is my favorite manga or book or whatever of all time. And I'm not a manga guy, I really don't read that many. But this is one that I have on my shelf right in front of me as I'm making this video. I have a little crocheted plus that my girlfriend made me. It's weird. I remember even trying to talk to my friend who I actually recommended this book to, and that he read it, and I was just randomly like, oh yeah, man, that chapter was crazy. And he didn't even remember it. So maybe it was just, my own personal experiences that made me connect with this chapter so much. But I think putting that aside, it is, like I said, after sort of suffering through this book with this character, while it isn't literally the end of the book, it is essentially, right at the end of the book, and it is so heart-wrenching, at least to me. And while, yeah, that isn't a video game, it is probably what has moved me the most out of any piece of fiction or whatever that I've read. Maybe there are other contenders that I'm just not thinking about, but I've been trying to think about this for a week, and I really can't think of a video game that has moved me like that. Minecraft and Sonic Mania, like I talked about earlier, are the only ones that I can think of, and those ones aren't really sad. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for the support on the past couple videos. It really means a lot to me. I know there's this whole, hashtag fix TF2 movement thing, but I think I've talked about the game enough on my own part, especially my last video that did really well was essentially about that stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Twitter and stuff in the description, and yeah, see you guys.